At some point in your life, you've likely been asked, what are 3 words that best describe you? Or something of the like. I always hate this question, but I digress. Some people answer this question with words that define their role: family member, student, rabbi. Some people answer it with adjectives like loyal, optimistic, patient. For what it's worth, those are not mine. And some answer with skill-based attributes like hard worker, punctual, problem solver. There's no right or wrong answer to this question, of course, and the possibilities are endless since no one can fully be described in only 3 words. But in reading the Torah portion this week, it made me think of a new word for the next time I'm asked this question. And that word is decoder. Now, that was probably not an impressive reveal, but let me explain. So if I had to guess, I would say that a large portion of my energy of every day is spent attempting to decode something. As a parent of a newly verbal toddler, I carefully repeat each word I think she's saying in hopes of understanding what it is she wants me to do, or what it is she wants me definitely not to do, or what it is she wants to do. It's a lot. As a parent of an infant, I try to decode each cry and each sound of this in a seemingly futile effort to provide for her needs. Is it the diaper? Is she hungry? Is she tired? Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. As a friend, a family member, a colleague, I often wonder about what is not being said, wondering whether or not I'm actually understanding what it is that the person I'm talking to needs from me. As a rabbi, I try to decode what is behind any given question, even questions about Judaism. Is it a question at face value? Is it connected to a childhood trauma, a broken relationship, a deep need for healing? In all of these scenarios, so much is left unsaid. As a Jew, there's another decoding process I participate in, and surprise, so do you. That's decoding Torah and our sacred texts in an attempt to uncover its eternal relevance and understanding the human condition. In our study of Torah, we interpret the words on the page, but we also interpret the words that are missing, that which is not mentioned, that which is not said. This week, as I mentioned earlier in the service, we find the Israelites encamped across the Jordan River at the end of their journey. They're about to cross into the Promised Land. They will be in this location until Moses finishes delivering his final series of speeches, which make up the entirety of the book of Deuteronomy. On the precipice of ending their journey of wandering, only to begin their journey of settling the land, God instructs them at the end of Numbers, when you cross the Jordan, God says, into the land of Canaan, you shall dispossess all the inhabitants of the land, you shall destroy all their figured objects, you shall destroy all their molten images, and you shall demolish all of their cult places. According to the Torah, a women's commentary, it says the rationale for complete destruction of the inhabitants is the danger that the presence of the inhabitants would pose for Israel's future. According to Numbers ideology, as well as Deuteronomy's, it continues, Israel cannot survive if it is subject to the influence and presence of the Canaanites. But it had me wonder, what is going left unsaid? I think God is terrified. God is terrified that if the people enter the land and do not destroy every single piece of evidence that the Canaanites ever existed, that the Israelites will be lured away from God. To be fair, it probably makes sense that God has this fear. After all, the Israelites have been quite the difficult bunch to bring this far the last 40 years. But what if instead of demanding complete and utter destruction, God had shared the truth? I'm afraid you will abandon me. I'm so scared that you'll think Canaanite religion is better than what I have to offer you. Perhaps if God was willing to be vulnerable, they could have worked together to build a stronger future together. They could have created a PR campaign promoting the strengths of the Israelite religion. Maybe the Canaanites had something to be worried about. We all know what it is like to harbor anxiety we're afraid to name out loud. Sometimes we have trouble even understanding what it is that we're anxious about to ourselves. There are times we have, as Brené Brown would say, fears and feelings that need tending to. When those fears and feelings are not tended to, unconstructive behavior abounds. When we skirt around our needs, we react poorly when we feel neither seen nor heard. We often cause those we attempt to communicate with to feel invisible as well, when they don't understand why we're so upset about a need we failed to communicate about. So much is left unsaid. And next week we begin the book of Deuteronomy, a book filled with speech after speech of Moses not quite saying what he means. He addresses the people and retells many of the episodes from their travels in more detail, often even rewriting the blame to be completely on the people, none of it ever on himself, and focusing on the shame they should feel for their actions of their ancestors. Because again, a lot of the things that he brings up are things that their ancestors did, not even the people standing in front of him, but he wants to shame them. He, of course, highlights what a burden the journey has been for him and how many times he has defended the people when God wanted to destroy them after each of their offenses. It's as if Moses is saying, I've done so much for this people, so much for God, and this is the thanks I get. We have to remember Moses has been told he is not entering the promised land. So we imagine Moses saying, I get to give speeches instead of entering the land. I don't even care about being your leader anymore, he might have said. I just want to place my foot on that soil that I have been wandering toward for 40 years. But he didn't say that. So much is left unsaid. In Deuteronomy, Moses repeats again and again that the Israelites will cross over and that he will not. Dr. Aviva Zornberg teaches a midrash based on this statement from Deuteronomy Rabbah. It reads, therefore, when they came to cross over the Jordan, Moses reminded them of every plea that he had made on their behalf, because he thought that now they would pray on his behalf that he should enter the land with them. What is the force of you are crossing over? The quote from Deuteronomy. Rabbi Tanhuma said, Moses prostrated himself before Israel and said to them, you are to cross over, but not I. He, Moses, gave them the opportunity to pray for him, but they did not grasp his meaning. According to this midrash, all Moses wanted was for just once the people to intervene with God on his behalf, just as he had done for them time after time after time before. Instead of being direct, instead of being vulnerable, Moses expects the people to understand what it is that he wants and needs without actually telling them. When they fail to meet his needs, he nearly goes into a spiral of trying to make them feel as little and insignificant as he does. How very sad for the man who is described as the most humble prophet to walk the planet. I suppose the problem is we don't always know what we need to be decoding when others are not straightforward about their needs, and sometimes we don't even know what we need to be decoding of our own behavior and feelings. But it's left me thinking this week, what if instead of spending all our time decoding what someone else means, we just said what we meant? It would save a lot of time and a lot of pain. Instead of leaving so much left unsaid for someone to figure out, what if we just said it? So often we're afraid to state clearly what it is we need. We're afraid to acknowledge our pain, our fears, but for some reason, we keep expecting people to know what it is we need. What is something you need, but haven't found the courage to tell the person you need to tell about it? A very small example. Many of the examples I could think of today felt much too personal. I even asked a few friends what some of their examples were, and they felt the same way. Most of them could think of something, though, that was something that they know that they need to say to someone else to be able to have their needs met, but just haven't wanted to cause trouble or whatever the reason is. But maybe you're afraid to come to services still. Maybe after not coming into this space for so long, it feels unfamiliar. It seems scary. Maybe you're afraid of not knowing anyone here anymore. Maybe you're afraid of not having anyone to sit near. But maybe you just need to say that to someone, and they'll come with you. Maybe you've learned that you need to say no more often, but you haven't expressed that to anyone, and you find yourself being frustrated that people keep asking for things. Each of us has our own example, some much more extreme than the ones I have put forth. But we all have needs that are not being met because we haven't told somebody. We're so fortunate that in our tradition we have imperfect role models in our texts. As I shared tonight, even God, for goodness sake, or I suppose you could say for God's sake, struggles to say what God means. If we are indeed made in God's image, it is no surprise that humans constantly struggle with this, even Moses. If God, God's self, cannot even express what it is God is afraid of. Sometimes we feel we are protecting others by being indirect, but to have our feelings and fears tended to, we must be transparent about them. We may not always understand what a toddler is trying to communicate, or a partner, a stranger, or a boss, or a coworker, or a friend. But what we can do is make sure we are communicating our needs as clearly as possible. When we end a book of Torah, we say 3 Hebrew words. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek, often translated as be strong, and let us strengthen one another. Perhaps, at least this week, we can think of this phrase one word at a time. Chazak, wishing strength for yourself to be able to communicate your needs. Chazak, that others have strength to communicate what they need. V'nit chazek, our strength to communicate our needs with one another, because it strengthens all of us. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will.